If you really want to trigger a lib, do something to better America for Americans, that really gets their goat. They hate Donald Trump so much, and quite frankly, America too, they will cry over a totally legal precision military strike on a boat full of cartel members and illicit deadly drugs. War crimes, they scream. No, just war against crime. At this point, it's hard to escape the conclusion they really do hate this country. So another day, another massive lib meltdown. If you really want to trigger a lib, do something to better America for Americans, that really gets their goat. Last week, the U.S. Navy, at the direction of President Trump, carried out a precision airstrike on a small vessel in the southern Caribbean, which belonged to the Venezuelan criminal organization Tren de Aragua and was transporting narcotics towards the United States. The operation killed 11 suspected cartel members. And wouldn't you know it, true to form, the Democrats are crying for the cartel members. Yes, if you thought Kilmar Abrego Garcia was the only alleged gangbanger they care about, well, think again. They aren't selective at all. They love them all, and they will die on that stupid hill, too.
What is the evidence they're providing that this was a drug boat?
The evidence has not been presented. We just don't know. And, a lot of the evidence now is at the bottom of the sea.
The latest example of how Trump continues to overextend and abuse military power. Not only did they kill 11 people, allegedly, they put American troops at risk.
This is an enormous scandal that is unfolding right in front of us. This civilian, non-military boat, even if they were committing a crime, was not struck in self-defense.
It's really mind-boggling how stupid and or evil these people are. They hate Donald Trump so much, and quite frankly, America too. They will cry over a totally legal precision military strike on a boat full of cartel members and illicit deadly drugs. And now they're absolutely melting down over Vice President J.D. Vance's no-nonsense, fact-based defense of that mission. War crimes, they scream. No, just war against crime. Here's the reality. President Trump designated TDA and other cartels as terrorist organizations. And as commander-in-chief, he acted fully within his legal authority and his constitutional duty to neutralize a threat. But make no mistake, the loony left doesn't just want illegal alien gang members staying in this country. They also want foreign drug cartels to keep flooding our communities with poison. At this point, it's hard to escape the conclusion they really do hate this country. Joining me now to opine on the insanity is former Deputy Press Secretary to President Trump and host of the brand new wonderful podcast, the Katie Miller Podcast, Katie Miller herself. Katie, it's great to have you. I don't know how you put up with this stuff in such close proximity, but you are truly a saint.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. But most importantly, how crazy is I'm sitting there watching those clips of the legacy media just totally not like they're just complicit in all these actions to get drugs on our streets, to ensure that we don't protect our country. And it's time and again, we see this legacy media just completely work against our country. I'm really sick and tired of it. It's why they aren't in charge anymore. We are. It's why podcasts are so important, why X is so important, and why going around what they want to make you believe is so critically important.
It reminds me of back during the first Trump administration when he struck Soleimani, and you had liberals that were literally like crying for Iran and for Iranian, dictators, whatever you want to call them. You had people like, oh no, how dare he? Like, no, please leave the terrorists alone. That seemed extreme then. I guess now we're so used to it. It's just whatever President Trump does, they have to be on the opposite side. It's really quite something, the way that their mind works on all of this. But I'd imagine that you live in the D.C. area, so you're directly impacted by not only the crime crisis, but now almost a month of President Trump vowing to keep that city safe and clean. For the viewers that don't have the pleasure of living in D.C., can you tell us what it's like, the difference that you observe?
So I've been in DC now, I think just about a decade. And one of my first years living here, I had a gun pulled on me at a stoplight in Chinatown here in DC. And when I called the police, all they said to me was, welcome to the district. They sent cops out. The cops didn't even take a police report because they said, this is so frequent here. There's nothing we can do. In 2020, during Black Lives Matter, we had protests at our our condo building that broke into multiple stores. I don't think there were ever any arrests and certainly no convictions for breaking glass nearly every single night during those protests. But suddenly President Trump wants to go in, protect our city, make sure it's safe so that way I can take my kids to our beautiful monuments, be able to walk the streets with my children without seeing homeless, doing drugs on every single street corner. And now suddenly the same liberals that they're busing in to protest are now busing in to protest keeping our streets safe. And that's not what the district residents want. You see district residents overwhelmingly praise President Trump for keeping our city safe, for making it so that we can take our kids to monuments without fear of being carjacked while you get your kid out of the car seat. That's what I voted for. I voted for President Trump to make our city safe again.
Well, now there's this big dispute over whether President Trump can send National Guard to other cities. And the libs are really melting down over that prospect. But I think a lot of these pundits and a lot of these Democrats, I think that they are taking it upon themselves to speak for the residents, saying, well, we don't want National Guard here. We don't want President Trump's help. Well, I think the residents, whether they like President Trump or not, if they're honest, and many of them have been, they want to see something done about crime. And if the National Guard is what it takes, unfortunately, their mayor and their governor, they have no desire to crack down on anything. So, at this point, it's amazing to me that Democrats really want to run on that, though. Like, what do you think is the political strategy there? To tell people, crime isn't actually that bad, even though you do fear for your life and you can't go in certain places during broad daylight or certainly at night. But you know what? Things are actually okay. Keep voting for us.
Well, you saw that DC, for example, they had half the number of police officers from 2020. They did not invest in recruitment or retention of these police officers. So oftentimes it's these rank and file are so excited for the extra support. They're so excited to get federal assets to come in and help them do their jobs that's why you saw Mayor Bowser here turn and sign an executive order saying, you guys can come stay indefinitely. It's often that city leaderships are at odds with what their residents want and certainly their police force. And so I think this is a full circle moment to saying, we're going to come in, we're going to secure your cities, make them safe again for New Yorkers, for people who live in Chicago, for people across our country who voted as a very fundamental level that what is the government should do for you? It should ensure that you have a safe place to live, to work, and again, do infrastructure, right? Because that's what matters to you, is that's not what you can pay for on your own. I mean, absolutely you can pay for private security, but that's not going to help if I'm going downtown and I want to take my kids to enjoy our capital or take my kids to show them America's great cities like New York City and Chicago, these beautiful places that have now become such trash.
Yeah, and for me, they want to argue about is constitutional and can he do this and can he do that? And, one group of legal experts says yes, one group says no. But in the middle of all that are everyday Americans that are saying, you know what, if I were to go somewhere, if I was going to go visit or if I lived there and I saw, folks from the National Guard there, I'd sure just feel a hell of a lot better. Like, I'd feel safer. It's like, all right, that's a great deterrent anyway, because then you don't have these little teenage thugs running around carjacking and all this, because they're not going to do that in the presence of the National Guard. They're just not. And it's crazy to me that like, oh, we don't want to militarize our streets. Well, guess what? A lot of your streets look like a war zone, Like, at what point we send our troops to defend our interests abroad? Well, what about here at home? And it's not only just the native-born thugs and felons, but it's the illegal aliens that they're dead set on keeping in our country as well. This kind of got lost in the news over the weekend, but I think the latest on Kilmar Abrego Garcia is the Trump administration said, all right, you don't want to go to Uganda. You got all these places you're scared to go. So they picked some remote country in Africa. I don't even know. I've never even heard of it before. But I thought that was an excellent move. Like, this Kilmar guy, he's afraid to go anywhere. So they're going to find some place for him. And I think that that's just brilliant.
It's what is called as a safe third country. So if you're scared to be in your home country, right, you're scared to be in another country, under U.S. law, we have a right to send you to a safe third country. And in this case, there's a lot of countries now in President Trump's second term that have stepped up to say, okay, great, let's sign up. We'll take people who you want to remove from your country. We'll put them in our country. It's an incredible economic benefit to them. If you're saying that illegal aliens who come into our country are so great for our economy, right? We've heard this time and time again from liberals, that these people are amazing helps, contributions to our society. Well, why doesn't other countries either want their foreign nationals back or want other foreign nationals who they say contribute tremendously to the economy? And I think that's really great. If he doesn't want to go to Uganda, he doesn't want to go to El Salvador, well, we can find a country for you. And that's what President Trump promised, right? President Trump promised that if you come into our country illegally, you will find no safe haven in the United States. He has vowed to deport every single illegal alien in this country. And I think just Kilmar's case would show you that if we renege on this one, if we back down, then what's to say somebody else who is also in this country illegally, this doesn't apply to you. This applies to every single illegal alien.
Yeah, you're right about that. If multiculturalism and diversity is our strength, we're expected to import the third world. Well, you know what? Maybe the third world should take some of the plentiful bounty that we have enjoyed for 4+ years under Joe Biden and the auto pen. Why don't we spread the wealth and the love and the diversity? I think it's a great idea. I think it's generous. We're just simply repaying the favor to third world nations. In my opinion, I think it's very nice that what President Trump is doing. I know you got a lot of inside information on this. I'll tell you, from somebody on the outside perspective here, the thing I noticed between Trump administration 1 and Trump administration 2 is that unlike in Trump administration 1, this president does not back down. And whoever in 1.0 that was consulting him to coddle felons and illegal aliens and to kind of back off or to maybe not go as hard as he initially wanted to, whoever those people were, they're gone. And it seems like a big difference now. It's no longer the liberals cry or some rhinos cry and we're going to back off. No, it's like we're going to flood the zone. We're going to do what we promised. And to me, that's the greatest success story that's come out of Trump administration 2.0. From an insider's perspective, what's changed over there?
I think this second Trump administration, everybody actually likes each other. In the first term, it was wrought with who do we please from this different group and that different group. You see this time with the Oval Office, right? How beautiful it is, how beautifully the president has done the Rose Garden dinner, right? He's enjoying himself. He's having fun. This is a great time to be a Republican, to be MAGA in Washington, D.C. He's made it fun to say, I'm for Trump, I'm with Trump. And what does that mean? We have a cabinet who loves each other, who really enjoys working together. What that means is late at night, when President Trump says, I want something done, it's not, I'll do it tomorrow. It's like, yes, sir, I will do it tonight for you, and I'll make sure it gets done. And it is often done in an hour or two. There isn't any more these fake blockers, right? Or legal analysis that say, you can't do this, Mr. President. They hide behind that when it isn't real. My favorite part of Trump, too, is obscure laws and using them well. I think too often we have laws on our books, right? Congress is continually writing new laws, but you never go back and look at what laws are on the books. And I think what's most fun about this is where there's a will, there's a way. And if there's a will to protect our country, save our citizens, that's what President Trump is doing. And when you have, say, Pete Hegseth and Pam Bondi, who really enjoy working with one another, you're going to find that they will find a way together to get their two departments together. And oftentimes you have these career bureaucrats who want to say no, who really do a very nice job of giving you these fake reasons why something can't be done. And you must believe them because they've been there for 20 plus years. And when you often find when you peel back the onion is that they're just lying to you, whether that's purposeful or ignorance. I don't care. But what we find now from our cabinet secretaries is they want to peel underneath the BS that's given to them and get to the real answer, bring in their own people, bring in their own team. It's been incredible what's happened this time and a complete transformative change from the first administration.
Are you at all frustrated with Republican Congress right now? Because, listen, the big, beautiful bill got that. All right. I think that was a great win, certainly for, federal law enforcement and immigration and a lot of other things as well. But, for me, I look at it and I see President Trump having to do all these things through executive fiat. And I see him having to battle these activist judges at every turn, pausing and delaying and, restricting everything he's trying to do to protect this country and further the America First agenda. And a lot of this could be fixed if Republicans in Congress would grow a backbone half as strong as President Trump's and actually do something about this. Let's get a crime bill then. Let's do something about it to solidify this so President Trump isn't having to threaten the National Guard. Let's do something about immigration so that when the next president comes in, it's not so easy to just open the floodgates again. As an everyday American who voted for President Trump 3 times and votes for Republicans, I see some great ones, but I also see some that talk a big game, but they've really done very little to advance this agenda that they campaigned on. I'm wondering if you're feeling some of the same frustration.
I think Republicans in Congress are a unique breed of people because they either want perfection and refuse to settle for anything less. And oftentimes in Congress, you're not going to get perfection because, unfortunately, different areas of Republicans elect weak-kneed Republicans who can never get to that perfection. And so therefore, we exist at a standstill. And sometimes I believe that good is better than nothing. Progress is better than inaction. And what ends up happening where you need Republicans to come together is that you have perfection over here and mediocrity over here, and they'll never meet each other. And I think oftentimes they need to meet each other, at least now, because we need to be forward progress towards something. And I agree that we need to have secure borders and we need to ensure that President Trump's agenda is complete. But we can't do that if we're not at least coming to some agreement somewhere. And unfortunately, with Republicans, we can never seem to get it together.
Yeah, there's some that like to showboat, for their own purposes. And they want to just stand on their moral high ground. And that's great. But if you're getting nothing done, then your moral high ground really doesn't mean much at the end of the day. It's a great thing to tweet about and fundraise about and say, like, I stood my ground. Yeah, but like, what did you get done for the American people and to advance the America First agenda? And if you're saying no to everything, then you're not doing anything. And that should be an insult to those that voted for you, expecting you to at least do the best you can to further the America First agenda to the best of your ability. It frustrates me. You brought up the Rose Garden patio. The libs freaking out over this is so amazing to me. It's unbelievable. You've got, of course, Gavin Newsom tweeting about it, and he's saying like, oh, look, they're enjoying, the patio. And, my response to that was he showed the collage of the photos of them sitting there at the Rose Garden, and he thought that was awful and tone deaf. I encouraged Gavin Newsom to include his own photo at the French Laundry in that collage. I don't think he's done that yet, but we, well documented know that during his tyrannical COVID lockdowns, he was dining at the French Laundry. But he seems to have a real problem with this Rose Garden patio that cost the American taxpayer nothing, privately funded. And it's just making the White House and the whole area better. Why do they hate that so much?
The problem with politics is it's incredibly hypocritical, right? You had Joe Biden take a vacation nearly every weekend, whether that was to Camp David or Delaware, lay on the beach. You had how many members of his family, protected by Secret Service. You had Hunter Biden off in South Africa. And I didn't hear Gavin Newsom then. What happens when Democrats do the same thing? Oh, Gavin Newsom's just quiet. But when President Trump, out of his own pocket, pays to beautify the White House and make it so Republicans, especially those in Congress, as we saw Friday night, can have the chance to come together after hours, as we just talked about, right? They need to get together. They need to have those moments to find common ground among the Republican Party so we can deliver real results for the American people. And often that comes over meals and social gatherings in DC. And that I consider that work. President Trump done it out of his own pocket. And I think it's incredibly hypocritical when you have Gavin Newsom stand up and complain about that, but not about portions of the Democrat Party. And to me, that's what makes politics so disgusting to most of the American people, is that you just want to see everyone get along and work for the benefit of you and your family, safe streets, safe communities. And that's not what Gavin Newsom's doing. All he's doing is dunking on President Trump. When President Trump, as you said, people want to see results. They want to see action. No one's delivered more action and more results for the American people than President Trump. That's all he does every day, is he works for you.
Yeah. It really feels like Democrats want this country to look like a third world nation, whether they want to import it, to our earlier point, or whether they just don't want to make improvements, whether it be on crime or infrastructure or just the overall beautification. It's like, no, leave it ugly. But we want to live in our gated communities or in our governor's mansion or on our winery. That's where we want to live, but we want everything else to look like crap. I don't understand the rationale behind that. It's one thing if you could say it costs taxpayers, but when President Trump is doing these things privately funded or out of his own pocket, who has the time to get mad over that? Just silly people, quite honestly. Another thing I want to talk to you about is I don't know where the president is on this, but Florida made a huge step to end the childhood vaccine mandates. Now, there are some people that are saying this is a huge win for parental rights. I especially believe in it when it comes to things like the COVID vaccine mandate. But President Trump, I believe, showed a little bit of hesitation because he believes that there are, a series of vaccines that are time tested and true. And he's a little bit concerned, if I'm catching his drift correctly. What's your perspective on that as someone who I would assume has probably a strong opinion?
I have strong opinions about everything in life, similar to that of my husband. There isn't something I don't have a strong opinion about, whether that be laundry or cleaning supplies. But with vaccines, I have 3 kids, 4, 3, and 2. He just turned 2 yesterday. And so we've had to make those choices in our household. And what I can say is that it really is a shame that vaccine mandates exist, and specifically that a doctor can choose to not take you on as a patient if you don't want to vaccinate your child. I think that's discriminatory. I don't believe that you should have to make the choice to vaccinate or not vaccinate and not see a doctor of your choosing. Far too long in this country, we choose to treat a symptom rather than treating the underlying cause. You know, my 3-year-old recently had lost voice for a week. And the first line treatment they offered to me was, have you been giving him ibuprofen every day? I don't know why I'd give my child ibuprofen every day for losing his voice. Why don't we find out what caused the lost voice instead of just treating it? And I think that's very similar to the vaccines in this country, right? We are so lucky to live in a country where vaccines have made such an incredible difference in cutting down on illnesses that were fatal. However, it should be up to the individual parent to make that choice. I think President Trump is incredibly proud of Operation Warp Speed and how fast he was able to deliver vaccines for those who wanted to make the choice to vaccinate. And I think that's the key point, that if you want to be a mask wearing weirdo who is still masking on a flight for 12 hours or 8 hours, and you choose to not be able to breathe, and you want to still wear a mask in the airport and on the airplane, you do you. Hats off to you. I don't know what science proves that you're making that choice. We probably are not friends, but you make your own decisions. I think the same goes for vaccines. If you want to have a vaccine, you should be able to get that vaccine if it is safe and if it's proven effective. I think to Bobby Kennedy's point, we don't have good data on every single thing that's out there, and we should make it transparent and make it accessible for everyone who wants to make an informed choice. I think the benefit and the blessing of President Trump and what Bobby Kennedy are trying to do for our nation is give them choices back, whether you want to make the yes or whether you want to make the no. And I believe that's where President Trump is he is so proud of his record to be able to deliver vaccines for those who want them, but at the same choice, not be able to force upon me and my family that mandate.
Right. Well, I just wish that the public and also congressional questioning of Fauci was anywhere near how they rip apart RFK Jr. You know, he's like, I want to remove some of the toxins from our food. And they're like, no, keep the toxins in. And he's saying, you know, maybe we need to take a second look at the science here. So we're not pumping out vaccines right and left that aren't solving a problem. And they get very angry at that. It's really amazing. I wish they had that same kind of passion for Fauci, who I believe is as crooked as they come.
If you remember, I was in those COVID task force for a year of my life I'll never get back when I was communications director to the vice president, right? We had the COVID task force. And I was there the very first day we brought in Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx. And I remember those early conversations about social distancing and why we had to mask and all of these crazy things that were not proven true. And man, if I could go back in time and scream at everyone and say, we are being made for fools.
Yeah.
Because that's what they did.
They did, and they'll never apologize for it. And I think it was a really dark time in American history for a lot of reasons. And there is going to be generations of Americans that are going to suffer from it, not from COVID, but from the lockdowns, the shutdowns, the masking, the remote learning, just the changes in social behavior that was caused by that dumb year to year and a half, in some places 2 years in American history is so stupid.
What they did to my daughter, she turned 4. That was when she was born in November of 2020. COVID was a big thing in March of 2020. And that entire generation of kids who were born then, and they made it terrible, if you remember, for mothers to give birth. They made it terrible for kids in school. That is lifelong learning issues and social issues that they created, as you just said, for kids. And they should be held accountable and certainly more than nothing. And right now there is nothing.
Yeah. I'll never forget flying when you'd have like toddlers who their parents were trying to force a mask on their face. And, you know, if the toddler was fighting back, you had the flight attendants coming and like you felt like you were going to get arrested. And some did. If toddlers, 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds didn't have a mask over their face, they would be escorted off the plane and treated like common criminals. But yet they don't want to lock up the criminals. People forget that. They're real quick to forget what they put us through. And now they don't want to lock anybody up. So it's really incredible. I want to talk to you, too, about some fun stuff, because I know that your podcast isn't just politics and all that. I know that it's also supposed to be for women out there that are probably, you know, more right of center, that there's a void there. And I've been saying this for, you know, a long time, because I think that conservative women, you know, we get this reputation that we're squares or that we're prudes or that we're not fun or, you know, whatever. And I think it's actually quite the opposite. I think conservative women are more fun. And I think that they're more free. And I think that what you're doing is excellent to speak to women and really to everybody. But tell me what we can find on your podcast.
So the Katie Miller podcast, which I just launched a month ago, I think tonight is episode 5. So 5 weeks in, very exciting. But as you mentioned, it's meant for conservative women, that we do not talk politics. I know there's a lot of women podcasters out there like yourself who do a tremendous job, but there really isn't something that's just lifestyle and the relatable window into someone's daily life from that of the right? You see on Call Her Daddy, she hosts episodes of here's why I'm waiting to have kids, or here's why I don't need a man. And my own life has proven that that's the exact opposite. I was a communications director to a vice president. I had 3 kids in 4 years. And then I was an advisor to Elon Musk at Doge for President Trump in his second term, while having 3 very young children. And I think my own career has proven that even if you took a maternity leave, you can still come back and climb to the peak of your career. And that's what I want to bring to other women, is that conservatives, just as you said, we're fun, we love life, and women's issues are more than just women's health. Women's issues is just how a female talks about an issue. And I want to talk to other women in politics and news and business and sports, because across all of those different jobs and different careers and different parts of our country, women are very similar, right? We want to raise these happy, healthy children. We struggle with bath time and what to make for dinner and how many car seats do we need? And do we have a car to drive all the kids? And how tired are we at the end of the night? It is all very similar, no matter your income level or where you live. And I think we need to bring more reality of what exists beyond the 1-minute videos of TikTok and Instagram to moms, because I want to encourage women to have kids, to have a family. And my last point on this is we saw with Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift, right? Their engagement was the culmination of their adult lives, not the beginning. And I think if we encouraged more women to have these meaningful relationships younger, we'd be doing better as a country. Our fertility rate would not be falling so dramatically as it is. And I don't know if you saw, Tomi, but today there was an NBC News poll out that showed that the last issue that women who voted for Kamala cared about, the last ranking, was having kids, was the healthiness and happiness of their children. That's not a country I want to live in. And that's why I'm launching my podcast.
Yeah, there's a big gap there. And I think it's hard. You know, you've got the folks that are the, you know, angry white liberal women who they're never going to come around. And I feel like they have a lot of self-hatred and a lot of other issues that they need to deal with and cope with and get therapy for and figure out on their own. But then you've got, I think, an entire swath of women somewhere in between who maybe don't even consider themselves necessarily political. Maybe they vote, maybe they don't, you know, maybe they vote for Republicans and Democrats and they're kind of in the middle and they don't really care about those things. And I would say that that's probably a lot of my friends, right? Like they consider themselves conservative or they consider themselves more Democrat, but it's not their life. Like they don't live it and breathe it like you and I do. Right. But they still have the same issues and they would like to see their perspective shown, or they'd like to explore it more. So I think what you're doing is fantastic. So I do have to ask you too, you and I are probably similar in a lot of ways, just the way that our life is and being in the spotlight and dealing with a lot of love and hate. So people ask me all the time, like, what's it like for my husband having to deal with hate and having to deal with the number of people that hate me and say things about me and whatever. So you're still very much in the spotlight. Your husband is obviously very much in the spotlight, has very strong opinions. How do you deal with that? Is it something that bothers you? Is it something that you have to, you know, factor into your daily life that you could share with us?
So I've been through the ringer for quite a few years. And someone said I developed like elephant skin to this. And so I really don't read it. I'm sure I see it because it pops up on my Instagram or my X account, but I don't read it anymore. I really don't care. If, yesterday we were out with our kids picking up cheese and someone was screaming at us while I was with my two very young children, screaming, we're like outside of a Starbucks and they're screaming obscenities. And my children don't notice it. We get them in a car and we're on our merry way and we don't even reference it. Because to us, if you want to scream and you want to be obscene, well, good, keep screaming, keep yelling. Because guess what? My husband and I get to create real change that matters for our country. If you want to yell from the cheap seats, from the 400 deck of the stadium, like have at it, great time to you. But I know that my husband is making DC safe. I know my husband is making a difference for our country. I know that his support and unwavering support for President Trump, going back now a decade, I think, is what really matters. And these people can scream all day long because they don't matter.
So what is that conversation like with your kids? Because now you're to some degree able to kind of shield them. And I'm sure that at some point it's become like a reality for them, but they probably don't fully understand it. As they get older, they're going to understand it. And I'll just be candid with you. I don't have kids. I hope to at some point. But I have to think about that too, because it's like, okay, I'm in Tennessee, right? So there's more people with me than against me. But if I still lived in Los Angeles and I had kids in school, I can't imagine the public ridicule that they would go through and what their life would be like, and having to explain to them, this is why people call your mom X, Y, and Z, and pick apart her appearance and pick apart everything about her and call her Nazi and call her Hitler, Barbie, and all this stuff. What is that conversation like with your kids now, and what's it going to be like in 5 years? I think a lot of people, a lot of moms are very curious about that.
Eventually, I'll have Stephen on my podcast and we'll do an episode on this and how we talk about it and what we do for our children. But first and foremost is that our kids really aren't in, I would say, like everyday life. We homeschool our children. They're never without myself or my husband really, or someone who's a trusted caregiver for them, who shares our morals and shares our values. And so that's first and fundamental how we feel, is we don't want them to be exposed to things that we don't want them exposed to. My daughter, for a brief moment, was in a preschool, and I think one of the first months in, they read a book about the transgender crayon to the class. And then the mom only found it because it was a photo in the weekly wrap up. That was our last day there. But the moral of the story here is that when my daughter watches, myself or my husband on TV, she thinks everyone's mommy and daddy is on TV. She doesn't understand it, right? She thinks when someone screams at us, they're screaming because they love us. And as you said, eventually one day I will explain it to my children, but I will tell them how blessed we are to be able to do what we're doing, how lucky we are to be, as a family, doing what we love for our country and why it matters. And I think that's really, if you're grounded in those core beliefs of what you are doing is valued and correct and important, then it really, I don't believe, will impact my children, because they'll always have someone there, which is a core value of our family, is that my husband and I are home for dinner with my children every night of the week as much as we can. And either mommy or daddy is putting them to bed every night.
That's incredibly important. And thank you for sharing that with us, because I think that some people, and this is another reason why your podcast is great, but I think some people think that those of us that do this kind of thing for a living, whether they're working in politics or they're talking about politics for a living, they see us on TV or they see us on social media and they think that that is the whole scope of our lives and there's nothing else. And we're not really people, we're just caricatures. And you can say and do anything you want to us because there's this notion of we signed up for this. And that's true, we did. And I have a very thick skin as well. People call me every name in the book. They pick apart absolutely every little thing about me. I would be lying if I said sometimes it doesn't give me a complex when they point something out about me or they tell me I look this way or that way. And, for a minute, it kind of hurts a little bit, especially for women when you pick apart a woman's appearance. It hurts for a minute. I'm not going to lie about that. But you learn to get over it and you learn to cope with it. And for me, that's why, a lot of my friends that aren't in this, if any of this was happening directed towards them, I think that they would probably be in a puddle on the floor. But I'm so used to it at this point. I think it's almost a superpower. But I think what you're saying is so important because, it's to a larger scale for you and your husband, me, and people that do this, but also on a smaller scale, there's a lot of conservative parents and conservative women, especially in liberal places, who are afraid to stand up for their values or speak their mind at all because they're afraid of the PTA, right? So I think what you're saying about how you deal with it is a great lesson for them on a much smaller scale in their lives. Like, it's pretty impactful.
It's incredibly challenging and scary to buck against the trend. And if you're one of 3 conservative parents in a class of 12 kids and only 3 parents care, the organization and the board is not going to care either. And so that to me is hard. If you want to create this lasting change and make it so your kids can enjoy it, then you have to build it yourself. And I find that that's what I've done. Instead of screaming and making scenes, I just build it myself. And there is nothing more I am passionate about than doing things for my children and making sure that they have a full, wholesome life. I sit there and I'm building Halloween decorations in August because my kids wanted to celebrate Halloween early. And that's what you do as a mom. You make it work. And I know there's other moms out there watching today who always think, how can I do this? As you mentioned, how do I do this for my family and my children? And, moms, I say we have more hours in the day than dads, but we can do it all. We can. And that's what I'm talking about on my podcast, right? Is this window into other people's relatable lives. Last week, we had Joe Gebbia, the co-founder of Airbnb. Tonight's episode is Mike Tyson. It releases tonight at 6. We have other great women coming on. Dr. Kellyanne Petrucci, the founder of the Bone Broth Diet, Jillian Michaels. And it's not talking about, what their issue and their core issue set is how do they make their lives work in the public eye, similar to you and I, because I think the conversation we're having right now, Tomi, is so important and so impactful. And I think we need to be having more of those.
You're exactly right. And I hope that you will drop your skincare routine as well, because you have flawless and beautiful skin. And you know what? For as much as they hate on conservative women, I think if you put up, conservative women to liberal women, I think, not a hard choice, but might be a little biased to that. I really appreciate your time. Congratulations on the podcast. And thanks for all that you do. You and your husband, you guys are fighting the good fight every day.
Thank you, Tomi. I really appreciate it. And it's just a Dove bar of soap that I find in my shower from my husband.
You are blessed. You are very lucky that is all you need. Good genes, as they would say at American Eagle. Thanks so much,
yes.
lady.
Thank you, Tomi.
All right, folks. A Ukrainian refugee was stabbed to death on the Charlotte light rail by a thug with a rap sheet a mile long. But don't worry, the Democrat mayor is thinking about it a lot. It's time for Final Thoughts. For as much as Democrats proclaim to love Ukraine, it's pretty obvious when given the choice between covering the brutal death of a young Ukrainian refugee or covering up for a repeat felon thug, they're going to go with the thug. Irina Zarutska fled Ukraine after Russia's invasion and sought refuge in the United States of America, specifically Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm sure never in her wildest dreams did she think riding the light rail in Charlotte would be more dangerous, more deadly than escaping a war-torn country. But nevertheless, there has been zero significant national mainstream news coverage or outrage over what happened to this 23-year-old Ukrainian refugee at the hands of DeCarlos Brown Jr., allegedly a repeat violent offender with 14 prior arrests he served minimal time for to boot. Well, he allegedly stabbed her to death unprovoked for no reason whatsoever. And after he her, he calmly removed his hoodie. He exited the train like nothing happened, totally and completely chill. Just look at that. Well, he was arrested shortly after and taken to a hospital for a hand injury, poor baby. But this is yet another reason why these soft on crime, felon first policies are dangerous, deadly, and need to go. Time and time again, we are told that it's the perp that needs more this, more that, more programs, more services, more TLC. And I'll add to all the climate zealots who insist we should all give up our vehicles and ride public transit. Fat chance of that. Not when this kind of violent behavior is common and often tolerated on public transit systems across the U.S. But don't worry, guys. Charlotte's Democrat mayor is thinking about what safety means. Isn't that comforting? She also asked the news and media not share the footage out of respect for the victim, but what she really means is, don't play this and make me look bad. What a total disgrace. And while the case of Irina Zarutska is getting a lot of attention online, as it should, she sadly is not some rare case, folks. And that's precisely why President Trump wants to do everything he can to clean up these cities and make them safer. Would Arena's fate have been different if more police officers or federal agents were around? What about if that psycho thug felon had been locked up and kept there after his first, 5 offenses? Democrats aren't just on the wrong side of the issue, they're on the wrong side of humanity and decency. How shameful. And those are my final thoughts. Tune in live tomorrow again at 1 p.m. Eastern. Catch full episodes on Fox Nation and Outkick. Please like and subscribe and comment to the YouTube channel at Tomi Lahren is Fearless. From Nashville, God bless and take care. Hey, thanks for watching. For more of my hottest takes, must-see conversations, and of course, my final thoughts, click right here. And don't forget to subscribe. Just click right here so you never miss a beat. I will be here every weekday, and I hope you'll join me.